With the much anticipated Godzilla vs. Kong now having finally been released, the first phase of Legendary Pictures' MonsterVerse is over, thus placing the franchise at a crossroads. Things seem to look fairly dire after the abysmal performance of Godzilla King of the Monsters at the box office in 2019, but the recent success of Godzilla vs. Kong, both in theaters and on HBO Max, suggests that the MonsterVerse will likely go on, though exactly in what capacity we still don't know. All we do know at the moment is that Godzilla vs. Kong director Adam Wingard is in talks to return, and the early rumor is that it will be about the son of Kong, which I'm down for. Whether Godzilla will be in it in any capacity, however, remains to be seen. Regardless of which direction it goes in though, the fact is that the rematch between Godzilla and Kong is essentially the final act of the first phase of the MonsterVerse, and a hell of a final act it was. So to celebrate the culmination of a series I frankly thought would never have existed in my lifetime, I thought it would be fun to look back at some of the MonsterVerse's greatest moments, of which there are quite a lot. All four films have a handful of standout moments that play to the strengths of each film's respective tones and styles. This is to say that narrowing them down to just 10 while also taking into account all four films equally was actually quite difficult. So if I'm missing one or more of your favorites, just know that it's by virtue of this being a top 10 list. With that preamble out of the way, let's get right into this. This is the top 10 moments of the MonsterVerse. Number 10. Atomic Breath Reveal, Godzilla. The first entry in the MonsterVerse is actually its most unique because its philosophy is the polar opposite of its successors. Modeled more after the blockbusters of old, director Gareth Edwards opted to craft the film as a series of set pieces, each one building off the scope and momentum of the last, until culminating in the big fight at the end, where Godzilla faces the Mutos in San Francisco, while protagonist Ford Brody works to move an atomic bomb out of the city before it detonates. Up until this point, the audience has only been given glimpses of the title monster, which on one hand can be frustrating, but on the other hand it turns something as mundane and simple as Godzilla using his atomic breath into one of the most epic moments of the wider Godzilla franchise. Not only is the moment built up over the course of the fight, but the moment itself is also a mini sequence of tension. Just after Ford has blown up the Mutos' nest, he catches the attention of the female, who is none too happy about having her babies killed. But before Ford suffers the wrath of an angry mother, a godly blue light glows off to his side. This draws the female's attention, and she turns to see the light ascending, like daggers within the darkness, gradually illuminating its source, Godzilla, who suddenly unleashes his atomic breath with such force that it sends the female reeling back, giving Ford time to escape. Godzilla closes in for the kill, but the male Muto swoops in to continue the fight and draw him away from his mate. Everything about this moment is cinematic perfection. The way it starts from Ford's perspective before expanding to the wider point of view gives it a sense of scope that, together with the gradually intensifying whirring effect, effectively sells the size and power that is being built up to and unleashed. Alexandre Desplat's score accompanying it only adds to this effect, at once bombastic, primal, and heroic. Even the humans on the ground can't help but stop and watch in awe, briefly putting their timely mission aside to witness nature's fury. It's a reveal that takes new viewers by surprise and leaves fans who knew what was coming cheering in satisfaction. While it could be argued that the second use of the atomic breath is even better, there's simply no beating the first time seeing Godzilla do the thing you've been waiting to see him do. Godzilla would of course go on to use his atomic breath many more times in the rest of the MonsterVerse, particularly in Godzilla vs. Kong, where he spams it to the point of absurdity, but none of them ever match this perfectly timed moment of Godzilla goodness. Beautiful, awe-inspiring, and spectacular, this moment is proof positive that sometimes less is more. Number 9. The Rodan Chase, Godzilla King of the Monsters. While Godzilla King of the Monsters ended up being the least critically and financially successful film in the MonsterVerse, it was arguably the most highly anticipated by Godzilla fans because of its inclusion of a trio of Godzilla's most iconic friends and foes. The prospect of seeing Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah being given the Hollywood treatment was in many ways a dream come true, because it was bringing these classic kaiju into the mainstream and bringing them to life with a sense of realism and scale never before possible. Each of the characters is given their moments to shine, but out of all of them, Rodan shines the brightest by virtue of one scene that captures everything the monster is about. After a brief skirmish between Godzilla and Ghidorah in Antarctica, Monarch follows them to Isla de Mara, where Emma Russell, with the help of environmental terrorist Alan Jonah, awakens Rodan from his slumber in a nearby volcano. Looking to lure the titanic pterosaur away from the village and into the incoming Ghidorah, Monarch unleashes a barrage of missiles onto him, and sure enough, he follows, leading to a thrilling chase that sees Rodan demolish Monarch's squadron of fighter jets, and ending with a brief fight fight in the skies between Rodan and Ghidorah that sees the former beaten into submission by the latter. There are a lot of elements that go into making this whole sequence one of the highest points of Godzilla King of the Monsters. First, there's Rodan himself, who hasn't looked this good since his original appearance in 1956. Super speed is one of this monster's defining characteristics, and this scene captures it in a way it never has been before. Seeing him decimate an entire town just by flying over it is both spectacular and horrifying, and that's only the lead up to the actual chase, where Rodan takes the opportunity to make short work of the pitiful fighter jets sent against him. His personality really shines through here. You really get the sense that he's having a great time toying with them. He even gets to enjoy a little snack. But what really makes this scene is Bear McCreary's score, a brassy, raw, tribalistic beat that summarizes the sheer ferocity of the so-called fire demon. Historically, Rodan has always kind of gotten the short end of the stick, and this still remains the case for the rest of the film once he gets his butt handed to him by Ghidorah, after which he essentially becomes his lackey. But in this sequence, he is in top form, a living hurricane of fire and flesh that cannot be stopped by man. We may not see this iteration of Rodan ever again, and if that's the case, then at least we have this awesome moment that reminds us of just how cool of a monster Rodan has always been. #remake Rodan. Number 8. Kong fights the Daddy Skullcrawler, Kong Skull Island. What makes Kong Skull Island such a refreshing entry in the MonsterVerse is that, for the first time in an American-made Kong film, the eighth wonder of the world is unshackled from the tragic trappings of the highly influential original. Finally, he gets to stop pining over a tiny beautiful blonde lady, and is allowed to be a hero monster who fights something other than a T-Rex. Replacing that enemy is the aptly named Skullcrawlers, which are actually designed after the weird little legless lizard creature that tries to attack Jack Driscoll during the log sequence in the original. And while the smaller ones aren't able to put up much of a fight against Kong, the big one, as Marlowe calls it, is another story. It's a nasty, malicious monster, and the battle between it and Kong is one of the best fights of the MonsterVerse. For one, it's in broad daylight, so you get to see every glorious moment in pristine detail. Any fears of the effects not holding up under the scrutiny of the sun are unfounded, because everything from Kong's hair to the water effects are near flawless. The fight itself is fast and ferocious, and about even, with both monsters getting in a few good blows. A few highlights are when Kong makes a bat out of a tree and uses it to bludgeon the Skullcrawler right across the face, and later when he goes full Scorpion and uses a boat propeller like a grappling hook. It's all just so well choreographed and makes for a blast to watch. Even the humans get involved in the action, luring the Skullcrawler away so as to give Kong time to get back on his feet. It culminates in the most disgusting finisher of the series, with Kong reaching inside its throat and pulling its organs out. So brutal. There's even a few nice little moments throughout that call back to the original film, without being obvious about it. So while it may not be the most profound or epic moment of the MonsterVerse, Kong's fight with the Daddy Skullcrawler is one of its best, simply because it's so much fun. Visceral and violent, it's the kind of kaiju brawl that makes you feel like a kid again. Number 7. The Tasman Sea Fight, Godzilla vs. Kong. It could be argued that Godzilla vs. Kong was the most highly anticipated film of the original MonsterVerse quadrilogy, just for the fact that it pits Godzilla against King Kong. The last time these two iconic monsters fought each other was way back in the early 60s, and it was one of the most important fights of Godzilla's career, establishing the formula for the many films that followed. Their first encounter pretty much ended in a standstill, and thus left the conflict feeling somewhat unresolved for the 60 years that followed. This is to say that there was a lot at stake in this rematch, and after a near lifetime of waiting, the movie wastes no time getting to the first round, which does not disappoint. In order to get Kong off Skull Island and to the Antarctic entrance to Hollow Earth, Monarch makes the brilliant decision to take him there by sea, which proves to be a monstrous mistake, as Godzilla wastes no time honing in on his ancient rival, tearing through the military protection like knives through paper. In order to counter and save their lives, Monarch releases Kong, who then spends the rest of the fight just trying to survive against the King of the Monsters. And that's what makes this action scene one of the series' best. It's not just mindless action. Kong is the clear underdog, and the fight is telling a story of that underdog doing his best to survive an enemy who is not only stronger, but has every advantage. This creates genuine tension and suspense as Kong simply tries to last as long as he can, which is easier said than done. He puts up an admirable fight, getting in a few good hits and even able to hold his own underwater, at least for a bit. Ultimately though, it's not enough, and if it weren't for the intervention of his human companions, Kong would have been finished. This scene also benefits from some some really great fight choreography and innovative camera work, all presented against a beautiful rising sun, so you can soak up and appreciate every second of it. It's a thrilling sequence from start to finish, and by the end you'll feel as exhausted as poor Kong. Godzilla is absolutely relentless and destructive, which after 2 films of him being presented as an apathetic hero is refreshing and true to the spirit of the character. And that's what makes this first skirmish between them such a blast. It highlights their differences, their strengths and their weaknesses, getting us on Kong's side while selling just how powerful Godzilla is. And the best part? It's merely a taste of the smackdown that was to come. Number 6. Crowning of the King, Godzilla King of the Monsters. When the original 1954 Gojira was ported over to the United States, it was heavily altered to make it more appealing to Western audiences. One of the changes made was to the title, which was translated into Godzilla and given the subtitle King of the Monsters. This simple addition proved highly influential, becoming a moniker that the Japanese themselves would embrace. However, in all the years that followed, it remained nothing more than just that, an unofficial title that many grew to just assume was the case. So when it was announced that the sequel to the 2014 film would be called Godzilla King of the Monsters, fans were curious as to what it could mean. Was it simply a reference to the Americanization of the original film, or did it have significance to the actual plot? Well, upon seeing the film, we got our answer, and it did not disappoint. Following an arduous battle with King Ghidorah that left Mothra dead and Rodan injured, Godzilla emerges victorious, blasting the last remaining head of the space dragon into oblivion with his atomic breath. Suddenly, Godzilla turns to find all of the titans who had been serving Ghidorah converging all around him, including Rodan, who lands in front of him and lets out what sounds like a challenge. Godzilla steels himself for conflict, ready to take on any new challengers. But then Rodan bows, submitting himself to the most powerful of the titans. Following his lead, the other titans follow suit, each taking turns to submit to their new king, leaving the surviving members of Monarch mere spectators as Godzilla lets out a mighty roar into the morning sky, accepting his position as the official King of the Monsters. Roll credits. To put it frankly, this moment is a Godzilla fan's dream, because for the first time they got to see the monster earn his title. To see Godzilla being treated with so much reverence in a mainstream big-budget Hollywood film, and with so much sincerity, makes this one of the MonsterVerse's most memorable moments. Admittedly, it's pretty silly, but it's also insanely epic, playing directly into the religious and environmental themes of the film. And besides, what's a Godzilla movie without a little cheese? And the cherry on top is that it leads into a modern cover of the 1977 song Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult, which plays over the end credits. All of this is one giant glorification of the character, which is an immensely satisfying way to end this action-packed kaiju extravaganza, getting audiences pumped for the next chapter while laying the groundwork for Godzilla's coming conflict with Kong. Long live the king, indeed. Number 5. Kong defends his home, Kong Skull Island. The moment in which Kong fights a squadron of biplanes atop the Empire State Building is one of the most iconic moments, not just of the original King Kong, but in all of cinema history. It is synonymous with the character of Kong, specifically because it leads up to his tragic death, something Kong Skull Island wisely avoids. However, that doesn't stop it from having an equivalent scene, in which Kong faces off against a pack of helicopters, only this time the end result is much, much different. To be fair to Kong, those helicopters, led by Samuel L. Jackson's Colonel Packard, had it coming, because the first thing they do when they penetrate through the storm surrounding Skull Island is begin dropping a bunch of bombs and blowing holes into the surface. This angers Kong, and he retaliates by throwing an entire tree through one of the helicopters. The rest of the squadron can only look on in stunned silence as they see the source, a 100-foot-tall ape who is none too happy with having his home being trashed by these ignorant humans and their noisy flying machines. The humans immediately do what comes natural to humans and fire upon Kong, which only angers him further, and he proceeds to absolutely decimate them, killing most of Packard's men and leaving the survivors stranded on Skull Island, which is teeming with all sorts of creatures that see them as snacks. This whole sequence works so well because it operates on a few different levels. Just purely as an action scene, it is spectacular, featuring gorgeous visuals and fantastic editing. The way that it cuts into the movie with no build-up is jarring in a good way that demonstrates both the danger of Skull Island and the sheer power of Kong. And as an introduction to Kong, it is incredibly effective because we get to see exactly what he is capable capable of right from the start, showing that this is not the same Kong as the original or its remakes. Despite the Vietnam-era helicopters being technologically superior to the biplanes of the original, they stand no chance against this bigger, beefier, and more aggressive Kong. This is a monster, not just a giant gorilla, one who wastes no time killing his enemies. It also efficiently sets up the conflict between Packard and Kong, providing a believable reason as to why he proceeds to hunt Kong down despite all reason. It's simultaneously beautiful and brutal, which summarizes the nature of Skull Island itself. And so for that, and as acting as the perfect introduction to the character of Kong, this whole sequence remains one of the MonsterVerse's best moments. Number 4. Kong takes on Mechagodzilla. Godzilla vs. Kong. From the very first moment Godzilla vs. Kong was announced, there was always the expectation that, this time, the two would eventually team up to fight a stronger enemy. Not only did it make sense from a marketing standpoint, as killing off one of the two main characters of the MonsterVerse would be bad for business, but from a narrative standpoint there was a lot of potential. And later, when it was leaked that Mechagodzilla was going to be in the film, it was pretty much a certainty, after which it was only a matter of execution, and boy did it deliver. Following Godzilla and Kong's brutal second bout in Hong Kong, in which Godzilla left Kong for dead, a newly untethered Mechagodzilla sets its sights on what it was designed to kill: Godzilla. Not being one to turn down a challenge, Godzilla goes charging in, which turns out to be a mistake, as Mechagodzilla quickly begins trouncing him. Seeing this greater threat, Monarch revives Kong with a bit of ingenuity, after which Gia pleads with him to help Godzilla, a task he begrudgingly accepts. And just when Mechagodzilla is about to deliver a killing blow to the king of the monsters, Kong leaps in and saves him, and the two proceed to take on the mechanical monster together. Even against their combined might, it proves tough, but thanks to a well-timed atomic blast to Kong's axe, courtesy of Godzilla, Kong is able to swiftly chop Mechagodzilla to pieces, finishing it by ripping its head off and holding it high in the sky like a trophy as he beats his chest in triumph. This moment is epic for two major reasons. For one, we get to see Kong fight Mechagodzilla, which is not something I ever expected to see. And two, we get to see Godzilla and Kong team up, which, as pointed out earlier, was an expected treat, but a treat nonetheless. It's just a lot of fun seeing these two iconic monsters working together for once, and against arguably Godzilla's most powerful foe, which makes it all the more special. And from a narrative standpoint, it really works because by having Kong deal the killing blow, it allows Kong to win the movie even though he lost the title fight. So both monsters win the film in their own ways, essentially allowing the film to end in a tie without technically being one. Both Godzilla and Kong come out looking good, going their separate ways and reigning over their respective kingdoms. It's really satisfying and just friggin' awesome. So for giving audiences something they've never seen before, and for ending the movie on a high note, the final fight against Mechagodzilla is easily a top 5 moment of the MonsterVerse. Number 3. Godzilla's Rebirth. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Godzilla has always been a character with religious and spiritual connotations. Whether presented as a destructive force of nature or a protector of the earth, his larger-than-life persona and invincibility make him a being far above us, one we can only watch in awe as he destroys cities or fights another monster. The MonsterVerse version of the character is one that pays no mind to our existence, not going out of his way to destroy us, but also not caring at all if there's collateral damage. King of the Monsters is the chapter of the series that dives a bit deeper into this dynamic, taking a closer look at humanity's tense relationship with the monster, which takes a dark turn when humanity makes the foolish mistake of interfering in Godzilla's fight with King Ghidorah, leaving Godzilla near death while Ghidorah is given free reign over Earth. To make up for this mistake, Monarch sets out on a mission to revive Godzilla with an atom bomb, hoping that the extra dose of radiation will heal him. Technical difficulties, however, force them to improvise, and Dr. Serizawa volunteers to deliver the bomb in person, giving his life to bring back the creature he had dedicated it to studying. What follows is the best scene of the movie, where Serizawa, in his final moments, lays his hands on Godzilla, bidding him farewell as the bomb goes off. Monarch above then waits in anticipation, waiting to see if their sacrifice was enough. Suddenly Godzilla rises in all his glory right in front of them, unleashing his godlike power into the sky in a blinding flash of light. He then turns, curious to the humans beneath him, and after a brief moment in which he simply acknowledges their existence, he turns and leaves, to face his ancient foe, for the final time. What makes this entire sequence so good is that it is everything King of the Monsters is about, summarized in one epic scene, and is thus its most important. Having Serizawa be the one to sacrifice himself is poignant because it is the reverse of the original Serizawa, and serves as a statement not just within the movie, but within the greater Godzilla franchise. It reaches a crescendo when Godzilla rises and blows his atomic breath into the sky, an image so visually striking it was used in all the marketing materials. Accompanying all this visual and thematic splendor is Bear McCreary's phenomenal score, which uses the original Godzilla theme by Akira Ifukube to stunning effect. So for truly putting the god in Godzilla, the Rebirth scene ranks up there as one of the MonsterVerse's most emotionally and thematically resonant moments, and one in which Godzilla fans are likely to never forget. Number 2. Rumble in Hong Kong, Godzilla vs. Kong. When going to see a movie titled Godzilla vs. Kong, there are certain expectations audiences expect the movie to fulfill, that being to see Godzilla actually fight Kong. The movie essentially has one job, and if it satisfactorily delivers on that, then all of its faults could be forgiven. This isn't necessarily an excuse for shoddy filmmaking, just more so an acknowledgement of what sort of film this is, which is a versus movie, which by their nature exists purely for one purpose, and that's to see the two title characters fight to see who is stronger. It's inherently juvenile, and therefore taps into the child in all of us. It was with great relief then that, indeed, for all its flaws, Godzilla vs. Kong more than delivers on what we wanted to see. And nowhere in the film is this more apparent than in the second fight between them in the middle of Hong Kong. Following their first fight, in which Kong barely escaped with his life, the two follow their respective missions, with Kong journeying to the center of the earth to find his home, while Godzilla continues to search for an unseen enemy he knows is lying in wait. It isn't too long, however, that the two meet again, this time in Hong Kong, and this time Kong comes prepared, brandishing an axe made from the spike of another Godzilla. Now that's metal. Emboldened and now on dry land, Kong manages to put up a better fight, evading Godzilla's atomic breath and even managing to turn it against him at one point. It isn't too long though before Godzilla gets annoyed and stops playing around, ending the fight with a brutal smackdown that shows that Kong really had no chance against the King of the Monsters. Godzilla gives Kong one last chance to submit, and when the stubborn ape refuses to budge, Godzilla simply walks away, leaving Kong to die. Victory goes to Godzilla. This fight had a lot to live up to, and as with anyone with eyes can see, it more than delivers. Despite being set at night, it is saturated in neon, giving it a unique aesthetic that allows you to see everything with absolute clarity. The choreography is top-notch, allowing both monsters to have their moments that play to each of their strengths. The fight is from Kong's point of view, which was a genius decision because it gives the fight emotional stakes. It's not just two monsters smashing and clawing at each other. It is telling a story, that of an underdog fighting with everything he's got, with ups and downs that builds tension in a way that leaves you uncertain as to who will come out on top. And it doesn't go on for too long, coming to a logical conclusion based on the facts of the situation and the defining characteristics of each monster, the unstoppable force and the immovable object. And so while Godzilla vs. Kong may be the silliest and arguably most shallow entry in the MonsterVerse, what it does well, it does better than the others, giving us the best fight of the series by far. Emotional, visceral, and a visual feast for the eyes, it's the rematch we've been dreaming of, and then some. Number 1. Havoc in Hawaii, Godzilla. The 2014 Godzilla film is filled to the brim with fantastic set pieces, all of which demonstrate director Gareth Edwards' skill at balancing scale with an escalating sense of tension. Instead of throwing everything on screen like so many modern movies do, he teases the audience, drip-feeding them what they want, bit by bit, wringing out every ounce of tension he can before delivering an epic release, only to then pull back again. It's somewhat annoying but highly effective at maximizing the scope of the film, and no single chunk of it better encapsulates this than the Hawaii sequence, which sees Godzilla and the male Muto being formally introduced to the world for the first time, to incredibly destructive effect. Following the hatching of the male Muto and the death of his father, Ford is briefed and sent to Honolulu to catch a flight back to San Francisco and back to his family. Unfortunately though, he is a magnet for kaiju, and so what do you know, the male Muto happens to be snacking on a Russian sub in Oahu. Just as the military begins scrambling to take the monster out, another, much bigger presence is spotted heading toward its location from the Pacific Ocean. It's Godzilla, and he's so massive in size that just his mere presence causes a tsunami that cuts a path of destruction through Honolulu. He arrives just as the Muto is casually strolling through the airport, and the two engage in a skirmish we don't get to see. This sequence is simple on paper, but it's the execution that makes it so effective. Starting with the reveal of the Muto, every moment escalates from the last, creating a rising tide of cause and effect that only increases in intensity the longer it goes on. The moment where Godzilla comes ashore is when it's at its most chilling, as we see people being washed away by a living force of nature that isn't even aware of their existence. All of it is presented from a human perspective, which is used to creatively hide Godzilla from clear view, making him feel incredibly large, imposing, and mysterious. This makes the moment when we finally do see Godzilla that much more impactful. And then, as if to play a cruel joke, it cuts, and we only get to see glimpses of his fight with the Muto on TV through the eyes of Ford's child. It's admittedly a tad frustrating, but also very clever, playing into the childlike wonder so inherent to Godzilla and monster movies. And so for milking every last drop out of Godzilla's introduction into the film, the Hawaii sequence is easily the best moment of the MonsterVerse. It has a tempo to it, a rhythm that makes for gripping cinema in a way that no moment in any of the other films ever quite reach. It's a reminder of how important pacing and build-up are to genre films, and how throwing everything on screen just because you can doesn't make for a better film. Godzilla is on screen for less than 30 seconds, and it's precisely because of this restraint that you feel every second that he is. You can really feel the love of the craft of filmmaking during every frame of this scene, and it makes for one of Godzilla's finest moments. Thank you so much for watching. What are some of your favorite moments of the MonsterVerse? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to Up From the Depths for more kaiju content, including more top 10s, video essays, and movie reviews. Thanks again for watching, and as always, long live the kings.